got some to a lot of experience and some that are probably interested in learning more here. So we'll take that and go. I've already had an introduction, so I don't need to do that. Today's agenda is just to talk about IIIF, which is something that I developed an interest in, and I'll explain more in a minute. Why interoperability matters to us as librarians, archivists, special collections folks. We're going to do a very quick scavenger image hunt at the Huntington Library. And this is just to keep it interactive, so the things that are bolded are kind of things for us to play with. I'll give you a little bit of information on finding IIIF resources in Connecticut and beyond, and then we'll talk about what it means to be a curator in the age of ChatGPT. We'll dive into using exhibit.so, which is something that I worked with to create a lesson plan. It's very approachable, scalable, easy for students to utilize, and then we'll give it a try. And if we have more time, we're going to do a little bit of work with the visual and primary resource literacy standards. And of course, a special thanks out to Anne Marie for moderating today. If you have questions, if you would put them in the chat. This is just about me. I'm going to move my little screen so I can see everything. I'm a former adjunct lecturer. My background is as a folklorist and preservationist, a writer and producer. So I worked with KAZU, which was a small station with NPR. Currently a graduate student assistant, going back to school, people, and an online student outreach specialist at IU Southeast Library. So I work in my department and at a library presently, both remote positions. I graduate, which you know, and then I'm also working on the side with the University of St. Andrews in their digital art history graduate program, which is where some of this interest developed. And I went to the SEI workshop last summer, which is a program of Arlist Art Library Societies of North America and the Visual Resources Association. And right there in the middle, this is my first kind of online exhibit that was a sample exhibit for the development of the lesson plan. IIIF is essentially the International Image Interoperability Framework. So it's a lot easier to say IIIF. It's an open standard for delivering high quality attributed digital objects online at scale. And essentially the things that I've highlighted for you there are the most important. High quality meaning that you can, with a lot of images, provide very, very detailed images that people can zoom into, use side by side. So if you know what Mirador is, that's a great viewer. And they're attributed because they're always coming back to the original source. So they're connected with the metadata, and the framework allows for museums, cultural heritage organizations, anyone that wants to use IIIF as a way to kind of see where it's being used throughout the world, which is really helpful when you're trying to figure out how are our collections being used. And at scale is certainly, you need to know how to do it if you're going to do it that way, but it is doable. IIIF works basically, this is a brief primer, it works through APIs. So there's two basic ones. There's an image API, which helps organizations deliver the images. And as you can imagine, when they're big images with lots of data, if you were to load that, if you know, like back in the early days of the internet, it would have taken forever, right? And it's still something that takes up a lot of data and space. And we don't want that. Students don't want that. We don't want data farms. So it allows organizations to deliver very specific elements of those larger files, which is really great. The presentation API attaches basic metadata and defines what the viewers see. So those two things are kind of the basic parts of IIIF. I've tried to do it myself. I got through the image API generation, and they do have great programs and tutorials. So learning those things are totally available for you. Why it's important, it's interoperable, so it standardizes delivery, offers really the most important thing. Viewers can have deep zoom, close looking, comparison. These are things that teachers want to be able to do with the resources. And then annotate images if you have that capability. The focus is portability and open access, so it's developed through a community and maintained. And the great thing about this is you don't have to understand using APIs to use IIIF. What you do need to know is what a manifest is. A manifest is the prime unit, which lists all the information that makes up the object, and it's what allows you to create these exhibits like we're going to do later. The metadata, as I said, is connected, and organizations, as you know, can track information. So why it matters right now to students and to us, I'm going to skip right to sustainability, because we need sustainable digital practices. And talking about interoperability and what IIIF is allows you to talk to students about those ideas. And that's why this is a great lesson or something that you can integrate into any of your work with students, because you can talk about what it is to prevent the overuse of data and maybe help stop the data farms that are happening, which isn't going to stop, right? But if we use data sustainably and we think of how we can manage our use, it does help over time. Promoting open access resources is really important because we all want to create equity and representation in the collections. So making those resources open and available to anyone that can find and manifest is a great way to promote equitable practices, increase discoverability, and also usability because it's fairly easy to do once you know how to do it. On the flip side, it's also helpful because it allows you to have conversations about things like reparative description. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of different libraries and organizations have created policies around that. You can utilize that to have conversations about, well, what are these resources that we're looking at and how are they described? Do those things need to be changed? Should we be tagging them using a folksonomy or something like that? And also, you can talk about representation in archives. So, looking at collections like the JT Last, which we'll start with, allows you to see kind of a timestamp of what things were at a certain time period, right? Primary sources, and thinking through what do these things mean? How do we talk about them right now? Do they need to be described differently? We don't know, right? So your first task is to actually visit the JT Last collection of graphic art. So I'm going to copy the link and pop it into the chat. And let's make sure it's going to everybody. And then I'm going to go there myself. So Anne-Marie, can you confirm that you see the Huntington Digital Library or anyone else?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. So this is your kind of landing page when you get there. And once you're here, you'll see that there's a variety of things in the collection. JT Last was a Silicon Valley pioneer. I don't know a lot about his history. I stumbled upon this when I was looking for resources, and the Huntington has a lot of them, specifically in IIIF format. And what we're going to be kind of playing with was my initial stopping point, the citrus labels. And what I wanted you to do as you follow along is to either browse, which would just be doing what I'm doing. So we're looking for Christmas iconography. I don't know why Christmas. I love Christmas, but it's just interesting to think about. You can do it that way, or you can go over and do a search in the top right, and you'll see that I got a lot of things. How many results? 32. So is it bringing up everything? I'm not sure. And is everything a part of the citrus box collection? Probably not. So you might need to play with that. I've actually found that if I do it by call number, if I sort it, it tends to show up. So here's a cheat sheet. This is one of the Huntingtons. Um, so it's a stock label, and this is part of, and if you go in, you'll see down here in the subjects, we have the citrus crate labels. And as you go down, you're getting all that metadata, which is really helpful. But this is where you find the III manifest at the bottom. So right there at the bottom is the manifest itself. And the Huntington has invested in mirror doors, so any object that you find there, you can actually click on the funky dunky M over here on the right if you're following along, and it will add it to your mirror door viewer. And so I'm going to keep this going, but I'm actually going to come back to the chat and encourage you as you find them. I see this is me. So when you find a Christmas label that you want to add to the chat, I'll go ahead and add it into the Mirador viewer. That's the built-in here with the Huntington. And then then we'll look at it a little bit. The great thing about Mirador is that it allows close looking and deep looking. So for my lit people, I know you know what that is. Great, thank you, guest. So I'm going to copy that link and I go over here and I want to add something. I got to move all my windows around. So I'm going to add a resource and there's the link. So I paste it, add it in, and now I've got two labels, two things that I can look at. And this is a play, kind of WYSIWYG play. What you see is what you get. But this is where I think IIIF shows its happy place. And you can also experience what it's like to look closely. So some of the objects that have been scanned in, like this one on the left, the Christmas holly wreath that I found for you, it doesn't have a lot of scalability. You can't zoom in. The one on the right, I can already tell you it does, and that's because down here we have our color chart, which is basically, this one's not the color, but it's still going to allow you, and it's done the work of, and you just see I'm using my mouse and dropping and dragging. And the ways that this can be useful is, imagine if you're using it for text that's very like old, which we'll see in a sample exhibit that I've put together. So handwriting that you need to see closely, or if you're just maybe looking at icons and you want to see something a little bit differently. So I'm going to cycle through and show you how, well, where did it go? Yeah, there it is. This is my original. This was one of those that I chose because it does have a lot of scalability. And then I had added a few different things to Mirador. And this is kind of where it gets to be fun, because you can go, what is this map of, right? And you want to look. And you can zoom in very tightly. So you can see Stockton there, Oakland, San Francisco. But you can also decide that you want to maybe compare colors if that's your thing, or iconography. And so I'm just using my mouse and zooming in and out a little bit and moving it around. And these things are great for teaching image awareness, using some of the visual resources guidelines to talk about and look at different elements that you're finding in the artwork of citrus labels. So these are all, I think it was late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe up to the 30s. And honestly, I should have gone back and looked to see especially how the historical elements of the collection, but it doesn't, it's not, it's around that time period. So I don't see any other additions to the chat. So I'm going to come back here and say that the guests won. Although I should give you guys a few more minutes to see. Maybe I'll check in and see how many people we have here. We have 10. Okay, so we might have some more. I'm not going to make you all do it, but if you wanted to participate, you can certainly add them to the chat. So the idea was that you would look for Christmas labels, and I'm just going to go back and navigate straight to it. There were quite a few, but they're not always discoverable by the metadata. That's the interesting thing. So like if I put poinsettia in here, it's not finding anything, and yet I know that there's a poinsettia icon right here, right? So poinsettia brand, I associate that with Christmas. That might not be something everybody does, but, and we're not building a story around that, but the point is you could. You can utilize this to look at images, to start talking about what is metadata with students so that they understand how images are found and how they're shared, and essentially discovered online. All those things are important when it comes to thinking about images in the age of ChatGPT, especially now that we have to question pretty much everything. So I'm going to close my chat, that way I can see everything a little bit easier and move on. So why is IIIF something that Connecticut academic librarians, collections folks would want to know? Really, it's that we have a lot of born digital or digitized surrogate resources already available. They're all in this format, for lack of a better word, but it's really a standard. The formats for IIIF files, they start out with your typical visual files, so PNG, JPEG, that sort of thing, and they become JPEG 2000, or I think it's pyramid TIFF files, and essentially they're going to be larger, more complex file types that you can then create these APIs with. Connecticut, of course, has Yale as a core founding member of IIIF, and I'm not going to click on all these hyperlinks, but you're welcome to cycle through them on your own. I think we put at the beginning of the chat the links for both of these presentations, and I have the Google Docs for you that has all of the information. Oh, the slide didn't load, so let's go back. We had that happen before, but that's okay. CTDA is, of course, the Connecticut Digital Archive, hosted by UConn, and that one has a fair number of IIIF resources. The next slide that's coming through, let's show it anyway. You get to see the the host area for the image that's not there, which is the Monte Carlo Bond by Marcel Duchamp. And you're welcome to click on that and look at it if you want. Why not? I'll just show you. So this is Yale University Art Gallery's collections. And if you go all the way down, it gives you the technical metadata and the APIs. And then you can click on the IIIF manifest if you want. Oh, I want to go backward. And these are the links for you. So with regard to Connecticut, we're close to Harvard. Harvard is also a very heavily invested organization working with a lot of IIIF format files. Brown University has them, and then Yale has the Peabody, the Art Gallery, the digital collections of the library, and I believe also maybe even the Beinecke. So why would you want to think about curation in the age of ChatGPT? So this is a 2-minute timed activity. I'm going to see if I can find a timer on here, but maybe I'll just use my watch because it's easier. What I want you to do is get out a pen, piece of paper. You can type it on your laptop, whatever feels relevant for you. We're going to do a 2-minute written reflection activity thinking about the following prompts. How do people curate? What methods do they use? How do they share curated lists or ideas or objects? What does it mean to curate things? So you're putting your thinking cap on. And what role does AI play in digital curation these days? Because I think that might be really useful for you. So I'm going to mute my audio, start my timer, put my video off, and I'll put those links back in the chat for you while you're writing, and then we'll come back. Got about 30 seconds to wrap up. And as you start to wrap up, or if you want and you're ready, um, let's see if anyone's willing to share some of their thoughts on how and what people curate with. What do you use it for? What does curate make you think of these days in the age of AI and ChatGPT?
And feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type a question in the chat.
my video back on. Okay. Well, let's see what people
I
say.
can say, Adrian, I think of it just makes me think of a museum when I think
Mm-hmm.
of, curating and not sure
Right.
exactly what they do, but it's just really neat stuff that I would love to learn how they do that.
Yeah, it's incredible when you think about it that um, curation has changed kind of completely, right? In a lot of ways, in terms of we used to think of curation as curatorial work that specialists would do in museums, and they're curators, right? And now everyone's a curator. So what does that mean? Um, let's see if anybody popped their ideas in there. Not at present. So I'm going to leave that open and go to the next slide. This was what did we think? Share out some of your thoughts in the Zoom chat. And so for me, the answer is everyone is already a curator nowadays. It's not specialized, removed from our everyday life. We don't have to visit a museum to see it. We do still have a lot of content that is pushed to us from different organizations, news and things like that. But news has even changed dramatically over the past 10 years, ever since social media came around and became very like in part of our everyday lives. The same thing for smartphones. Not everyone has them, but a great majority of the population does have some sort of access to online experiences. So, everyday digital curation is a common practice. We do all kinds of things. We create playlists, we have Pinterest boards, we organize our digital content in various different ways using a lot of different platforms and a lot of different methods. And you can still go back to your regular written list, right? That's a curated list. But this is the idea of being able to share images and AV, things like that, with other people very easily. So we have, of course, the majors, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook would still be on there. Some people are into, what is it now? Twitter became, I can't even remember what Twitter became because they don't do it anymore. But it basically makes that culture is more democratized, right? Because it's not just in museums. People are doing it on their own platforms and in their own networks all the time. So, as a pedagogical approach to your teaching and working with primary source materials, it connects familiar digital activities to scholarly curation. And I'm not going to dive too far into what scholarly curation is because I think that's different for different disciplines, right? You're going to have to approach that from whatever particular aspect you want to do that. Making learning approachable and effective for students because they're already used to sharing. And some of them probably already create exhibits. You're just asking them to do this in a very specific sort of way. It addresses power and context, which is also really important when you're taking the activities out of those museums. The single, like a lot of museums I've worked there, they have maybe staffs of 5 to 10 if they're big of curators. And that's the big ones. Like the smaller ones are going to be much more smaller groups of people doing that work, right? Which means that essentially it's one or two people whose views are telling us what to think and do. And this is different. So it relates to higher education because um, we want to open up the narrative. We want to talk about, what is AI? How is it influencing our world? What do these primary sources do? And how can we talk about them in relation to modern contexts? And then it also emphasizes stewardship, both sustainable and contextual scholarly stewardship, authenticity, the ethical reuse of materials so that you're not just downloading and constantly sharing out, but also attributing it properly where those materials are coming from. And then digital literacy, because you start talking about things like sustainable, interoperable practices. The chat GPT era, we have challenges. Gen AI, generative AI is kind of changing rapidly. It is hard to pinpoint, is that something that's real? I came across an image myself the other day and I had to ask myself that question. So this allows you to talk about digital curation in relation to images and where they're coming from. Are they real? Are they surrogate? What are surrogates in relation to generative AI and how do librarians think about surrogates. It also talks about selection and contextualization. So you're able to talk with students about, well, why are you choosing these images? What are they doing for your argument? How are you looking at them and utilizing them in the story that you want to tell? It allows students to become familiar with and be able to navigate archives, and they understand how they start to work and function. And then, of course, it fosters originality and attribution, both in images, which we all want to see, and in thought as well. So, why Exhibit? I went with Exhibit SO partially because it was affiliated with St. Andrews, but also because it's really easy. So, as a teacher who's been working for a number of years, this is something I could see being easily integrated into an in person class or hybrid or even asynchronous class. And my original lesson plan, I think, was for 2 different weeks, so it could be spread out over 2 modules essentially. But you could easily adapt this to in person where students play with and start to understand how these IIIF manifests work, where to find the resources, how to navigate the systems together, and then also how to work with Exhibit, which is a pretty easy tool. So this is just a tool comparison. Some of you might be familiar with some of these tools on the left. Mirador we used earlier is a viewer and that's embedded. So it was very easy to use it in the Huntington's collection because they worked it with it that way. The exhibit.so is a web app. So it's out there on, all you need is a browser. Um, I would suggest using like Firefox and not Safari based on personal experience, but some of that might be my settings. So it uses IIIF integration as a native file format. It makes it easy, and then it's easy for people to put together exhibits. So this is a sample exhibit that I worked on in preparation for this workshop. And IIIF has this helpful guidebook. So if you click on that, you'll see that it, and I'll just put the link in there for the chat so that you can bring it up if you want to follow along. They have a bunch of resources, but it's fairly easy. So we're just going to start it, and it opens up in a new window, and you can see that I have the exhibit that I've created today. It's actually completely nonsensical. So don't think of this as one story. This is more of a teaching. I'm trying to teach you and work through some of these resources. So you start out, and anything that you put in a description ends up in the top left. It depends on how you set this up too. So I believe this is, I forget, it's not scrolling, but you can see that what I've done is I started out with the end papers of this bookplate that's inside the George Dunn donation. You can see on the bottom, George Dunn of Woolly Hall near Maidenhead donated this to the Harvard Law Library um, and in 1913. And then I zoomed in because I wanted to make a comment about it. Dunn is from Maidenhead, which is in the suburb of Boston. It also appears to be an alumni of Harvard Law. This manuscript was donated to HLL in 1913. All those things are things that you could get. And again, this is narrative that you're creating. So your exhibit wall text essentially is what you're putting in there. And it's up to you how you're going to decide that. A lot of this is just informal. And there I decided I'm going to go into the book that he donated and see what's in there. And I came across illuminated manuscript, right? So does this qualify technically as an illuminated manuscript? That would enable you to have that kind of conversation with students. What are they? What were their purposes? What was the function? When would you see them? And then I zoomed out a little so that I could see it. This is another page in the manuscript, and I added a new comment. And here I am just actually narrating my steps in terms of how you add these items to the exhibit using SO. Um, but you know, the main thing is don't forget to click on the green check mark, which I'll show you. And then this was random. This is, I wanted to find out how hard it was to find a IIIF manifest at Brown University. This image is from there. It was a little bit harder. Some of the resources, they're buried. So the Huntington I like because it's really easy for you to copy and paste it. Other places it may be a little more difficult. You might have to do some hunting and kind of like self-education in terms of how do I find the actual tiny part of the manifest that I need and not everything else that allows me to scale these images and do all this kind of deep zooming. And then there's the Highly on the Ivy. This was one of the Christmas slides from the JT Last collection. And you see that you can actually integrate. You won't be able to hear this, I don't think, and there's YouTube, and we don't really need to do that, but it connects to YouTube or whatever, so you can use hyperlinks is the main point there. And then this is the zoomed in image of the Tarzana Hill crate label. So you can see this color choice over here, and essentially, and then I want to zoom out, maybe I want to use that in the exhibit that I create. And those are all steps that you have to kind of take. Of course, you could replay it if you want to. So I started with Harvard, but it's not really a Harvard exhibit. That went to Brown and back to JT Last. So there was a lot of things to that. The things that you want to know when you are playing with these collections is you want to make sure that you are sharing and saving your URLs. So the way that it functions is it'll create and host these exhibits for you on its platform. You can also embed it into your own websites, which makes it really useful if you want to develop exhibits or curate digital exhibits that are available there. That's not always going to happen. You might just want, and with students, I wouldn't really bother. I think it's more of a let's have this and then let them share out the different views. So that's going back to that. That's the view mode. And going to the next page. This is the part of the screen that I was talking about when you have to actually decide, are you going to share the editing link or are you going to share the view link? So I would share the viewing link with others and make sure you keep that editing link somewhere safe and to yourself, because otherwise people will be able to edit it for you. And that may not be an issue. Maybe you want to do a group edit, right, of something like that. But it just depends. So what I'll do right now is actually show you how to use Exhibit SO. I'm going to stop and check in on the chat and see if there's anything that popped up there. I don't see it, but if you have questions as we go along, you can follow along with these particular instructions, but you don't have to. It's a fairly easy bit of software to navigate. So this is what happens. You go and you land on the landing page, and it's going to tell you everything about, who uses it and why. And then you want to just create an exhibit. So this is what they consider a self-hosted exhibit. You click on that, and then you get to decide. And people might want to play with this. I would encourage you, especially if you're doing one-shot instruction sessions or you want to integrate this into an online course or something, you can utilize it to create quizzes, which is fun, slides, which is what you saw before, scrolling, which just means the images are scrolling down the screen versus me clicking the right button or the left button, and a kiosk. I'm most comfortable and I like the slides, so that's what I do. So this is my sample title. I don't really have to do it. I'm going to put my name in there. Well, I'm going to leave it all in caps because why not? And then this would be a description of what the exhibit is. If you have any rights that you need to acknowledge, this is a great place to do it. And whether you want it to be public or password protected, I don't need it password protected, so I'm going to leave the default public. And I don't care if people duplicate it. Of course, then you got to tell it that you're not a robot, which is going to take a lot of fun time and very good eyes, right? I feel like lately these have gotten worse in terms of they take a lot of time to get them done. And now I got to do the motorcycle. This is all part of the recording. How funny, right? Um, and then you want to read and agree to it and create your exhibit. Once you've done that, and I got to move this little part around. So I've got my sample. The way that these function are, you want to add an item, but first you actually have to add it to your library. So you click on the add item. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but the captions, it's like I have to keep moving them around. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to close some of these out because you've seen them. Whatever image you choose, wherever you find it. So wherever you find the IIIF manifest label, let's see if we can get that out of the way. And then you want to find the IIIF manifest, which is right here. So I'm going to copy it and I go back to my exhibit. And down here on the right, you can see that it's actually got a fair number of ones that I've already played with. And I want to import it. And then it should show up here as an item. And once it's there as an item, you can click on it, add to the exhibit, and say you have more than one. So if I wanted to add more than one, I could, but I'm just going to go ahead and add that to my exhibit. And it shows up here, which is great. This one doesn't zoom a whole lot, but you see that it has a little bit. I'm just going to leave it way zoomed out. And once I've got it selected where I want it view-wise, then I'm going to go over here and click on the plus button under my title and description, and it's going to open up this place. This is essentially what you saw on the top left whenever there was text. So my exhibit labels go here. And then I can change the background color. You can do all kinds of things. You can add hyperlinks. You can bolden or italicize text, etc. And the main thing that you do that sometimes I forget is you want to click on the green check button, because that's pretty important. Otherwise, it won't show up. And then you want to add another item because no exhibit is complete with only two, right? So let me see. I'm going to go back here and find another one. And this one looks familiar, right? Because I've already used it in some of my materials. So I'm going to copy that link, go back, add my link in, and import it. And once it's there, again, I can click on it, add it to the exhibit. Voila, it comes in. And then again, I want to do a little bit of playing with it. Maybe I'm working on a story about the University of Redlands. Had a friend go there once, right? So I'm going to leave that right where it is because it works for my storyboarding. Redlands is here. And again, I'm not spending any time developing this because I just want to show you what it does. So once you've got your exhibit created, this is an exhibit of 2. It's a very small one. You want to preview it because you want to know what it's going to look like. And you'll see that it's got the title, description, who made it, and then the start. And here's our exhibit labels, and we can go back and forward. And you see that it basically zeroed in on Redlands, which is right where I wanted it to. That can be a useful tool in a lot of ways, because when you pick these images that are scaled out, that have the ability to be very, very closely read, that allows you to develop context, right? And relationships and other things that are super important. So I'm just going to replay that. But that's the basic steps. Outside of that, what you want to do, this is probably the most important once you're done, is you want to make sure that you have the information you need stored somewhere. And I'm imagining that these are going to run off at some point. They're going to get tired of hosting these exhibits, or they're going to be like, there's a time limit to this. So I wouldn't think that they're going to live into perpetuity. But the one that I made a year and a half ago is still out there. So it does have some longevity, and certainly long enough time span for you to utilize it within the scope of a classroom session. So a one-off session or over a couple of weeks, but certainly even I would think over the course of a semester. So students are working with materials and actually developing and curating an exhibit, they'd be able to go back here and continue to edit it. And the main thing that you're going to need to do is right here. You want your share URLs because this is what enables you to get back to them. If it's just things that I want people like you and the audience to view, I would, copy that and share it out. So here's my 2 little item exhibit in the chat. Save it forever because you're going to want to come back to it, right? There's also an embed code so that you can utilize it within websites. And most important is the edit. So it reminds you, keep it safe, because if you don't, it's going to be hard for you to get back to it. So you want to copy that and save it somewhere that you can return to it. And obviously, that's a little bit private because I think that will help. So this is your turn to try exhibit. So I'm going to put the link in there in our chat. And we have, let's see. going forward, and I didn't mean to do that, but that's okay. Um, I think it was about 5 minutes. I wanted to give you all an opportunity to try this and to ask questions. So I think because, no, we'll just do a little bit of time. I was thinking of putting you all in breakout rooms, but then I won't be able to help you with questions. So I'll give you a few minutes. It's 11:27. We want to give about, I'm guessing maybe Anne-Marie 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. Um, so we'll give you all a few minutes to try this. And if you don't want to try it now, you can always follow along later. The great thing about it, as you saw, is it's pretty teachable and it's pretty easy to figure out on your own. I think certainly digital natives, like a lot of students, younger students these days, would be able to do it, and adult learners, I think, would also be able to do this, as long as you take the time to show folks what a IIIF manifest is and how to find it. And really, to make it easy on yourself, I would suggest that you go back, develop your own list of resources, but like the one that I provided here, we have a few that I've basically gone and picked out, right? At Yale, at Brown, at Harvard. Those are all big name organizations, but you will find IIIF elsewhere. And that's the great thing about it, I think, is that it's starting to take off. And because it is open access, my hope is that it actually starts to work with and people start to utilize it to create resources for community archives and smaller archives so that we can get those kinds of things represented and be able to have them be usable, not just on a website somewhere where you can't really see it, you can't work with it, but something like what we saw earlier in some of these examples. And so IIIF maintains a pretty robust list of places that you can go. And I would just suggest that if you wanted to integrate this and you're not working with your own collection, then find one that is easy to work with. Again, the Huntington, fairly easy to find those IIIF manifests. They do it very well. And there are others that are like that. So, not to put you off, but I'm going to take a peek and see what the chat is saying. Awesome, thank you. And I'm going to move my presentation back up. And I think given the time, it's 11:30. What I'll do is just keep talking while you're working on your resources. And you can follow along here if you're not working on developing an exhibit yourself. Um, this is a slide about reading and using visual sources. Why would you do that? What is the importance of it? It allows, again, for the close looking, talking about authorship and purpose. Like, where is this coming from? What is this information telling you? It's about some of the trade groups of the Palmetto State Teachers Association, and this is a part of the Black Teacher Archive, which is, I believe, housed at Harvard. If you click on that link, it'll bring you there. And there is a lot of resources there as well. And down at the bottom here is the IIIF manifest there. So again, something that's pretty easy to add, has robust documentation, and you can see things fairly easily. And I think the main thing about this is taking the step of finding resources and helping students discover them, but then also utilizing them and using them in some kind of a way that they're familiar with and isn't just another essay, because students get asked to write a lot of essays these days, and writing certainly has its place, but so does working with visual resources, because our world is really visual right now and it's digital. It also allows you to address copyright and licensing, talking about things like Creative Commons licenses. You can talk about cultural sensitivity issues, ensuring that there's an ethical use and attribution. And again, like with resources around the world, that there's representation of different cultures and communities there. And aligning these practices with the frameworks that we have strengthens learning outcomes and assessment. So these are two primary source literacy, two standards. The first one is primary source literacy standards. This is from the Society of American Archivists and the ACRL Rare Book and Manuscript Section Joint Task Force on the Development of Guidelines for Primary Source Literacy. They were developed or published in 2018. I think they are the most recent, but we might see updates as some of the standards are being updated right now. Primary source literacy is essentially a combination of knowledge, skills, and abilities necessary to interpret, find, evaluate, and use primary sources within specific disciplinary contexts in order to create new knowledge or to revise existing understandings. And if you read that document, you'll actually see that they say that's not a great definition because it kind of sets things in stone that it's not something that you actually can set in stone. Primary sources are variable and need to be treated as such, even in terms of how we define them. And then visual literacy standards, I picked this because I love thinking about the Cybertruck and kind of the advertising and marketing that they did around it. Um, Clearly, if you look at that image, it's like we're on Mars, right? There's the Cybertruck, and it's on Mars, and we're all going to Mars someday. The framework for visual literacy there defines visual literacy as a set of abilities that enables an individual to find, interpret, evaluate, and use, again, those similar things, and create images and visual media. And so nowadays, it's also related to AI. How do you identify AI images, right? So those are the two kind of main components used in creating these activities. We don't really have time for the breakout rooms, um, but thinking about how to apply these standards to your lesson plan and then utilize them in the assessment is where you might decide to lean in as you integrate this idea into your own classes. So moving forward, digital curation as a scalable practice is something that you can talk about here. It aligns well with librarianship values and goals, especially interoperability and sustainability as concepts that we need to teach and think about. And then the foundational skills for navigating AI, really being aware of where images are coming from, how they're made, how they're shared, how we can do that in a more sustainable way. Those are all important aspects. And then finally, we do have a few minutes for a Q&A, so it's 11:34. I'm going to stop my screen share and just check in with you all.